Good morning, my dear students. Today, we shall discuss the regulation of blood glucose. Regulation of blood glucose. We shall discuss this point or this topic. Blood glucose. We all know that the glucose is the main source of energy for all the animal beings. And this is circulating in the blood. Into the blood, how we will get glucose? By continuous supply through nutrition, by food. And the human being, at least, is a meal taker. That means he takes at regular intervals some amount of food. That means that food is being entering into the gastrointestinal tract, and then it gets digested to the monomers. If it is the carbohydrate, mainly the food is in the form of polysaccharides. They are all being hydrolyzed into the monosaccharides, and the monosaccharides will be assimilated or rather absorbed into the blood. So in the blood, they will be circulating. So that means in the postprandial, otherwise immediately after the food is taken, slowly this material is entering into the blood. That means the glucose, in case of carbohydrates, meal, it is being slowly raising the concentration in the blood. But each and every animal has a normal range of circulating glucose. For example, for human beings, a normal level is being set. It is set by the nature. And different animals have a small variance in the normal levels. Majority of the animals, they don't feed continuously. Especially the non-vegetarian animals who take non-vegetarian meals. They take a meal at a different distances, long distances. But whereas those animals feed on vegetable food, that is the leaves and others, plants, because the availability is more, they feed frequently. But these non-vegetarian eating animals, they feed at different long periods. So in between, the level of glucose need to be maintained. If the glucose level is not maintained, all the tissues will not get the equal ration. But it should, all the tissues should get the ration of glucose, and this will be supplied by the circulating blood, and then that glucose is utilized in those tissues or in those cells by way of oxidation, glycolysis, and the energy is being supplied, and they survive with the energy. So now, this regulation, when food is taken, a very high concentration will be entering into the blood, and that concentration need to be sustained, need to be distributed in various places, nor it has to be stored somewhere. And then when the meal is over and continuously the blood glucose is being supplied to the various tissues, slowly blood glucose level will be reducing. Then the level should be replenished by from the wherever the glucose stores are there, like glycogen that is being stored in the liver, etc. And then if that is also finished, then newly glucose need to be synthesized from non-carbohydrate sources, and that is what is called as gluconeogenesis. So these two processes will continuously ensure. So when the meal is over for a long time, the meal taken, and then immediately there need to be the material need to be stored. This is the storage form is by way of glycogenesis, or even that level is also processed. Then this carbohydrate will be converted to lipid, and the lipid triglyceride is stored in the adipose tissues. That can be any amount of energy or any amount of glucose can be converted to the triglyceride, that is by way of lipolysis, lipogenesis, and it can be stored in the adipose tissue to any extent. So this is how a balance of glucose level will be maintained. Now let us see the regulation of blood glucose. The blood glucose regulation we shall try to discuss in 5 forms. That is, one is normal. What is the normal plasma glucose? Normal plasma. How much will be normally will be circulating? And then factors maintaining the blood glucose. What are all the factors that maintaining the blood glucose? Which are the ones which tries to elevate it? Which are the ones that tries to reduce it? And this is been discussed into topic, that is 2 topics. Postprandial regulation, that is immediately after the food is taken, and after some time, more than 2 hours is over, then slowly starts the long period after the food, and then a stage will come called fasting stage. That is, food is taken up to 2 hours, it is called as postprandial time. And after postprandial, it is still a vague time, but up from 8 hours to 12 hours period after taking the last meal, it is defined as a fasting state. So slowly it is a spectrum of time that is progressing, and then the glucose is continuously being supplied to the various tissues in the organism or body, and then slowly the glucose levels are coming down and down in the blood, and now the counter mechanism to replenish the glucose to the blood should come play in. Those things we will discuss now. And regulation during fasting. And the last one is starving, and that is the last one. Later, in a special way, it will be discussed. But routinely, this is the cycle of a regular animal that takes food and then again it sleeps and then takes food, etc. And a normal cycle is this. And if this goes abnormal, clinical aspects, the disease aspects, if the blood glucose level is beyond control and glucose level increased than normal levels to definite cutouts, then it is called as hyperglycemia. And hyperglycemia is associated with a popular disease called diabetes. Glucose homeostasis, balance of glucose in the circulation. It is the maintenance of blood glucose level within the normal range. The blood glucose level must be maintained within the narrow limits of how much is the blood glucose. You all know about it when you have done your practicals in the practical hall. The blood glucose estimation. In connection with that, you learned already how much will be the blood glucose. In the fasting state, this is in the fasting state, 70 to 100 milligrams per deciliter. For every 100 ml of blood, there will be 70 to 100 milligrams of glucose will be there in the blood in the fasting state of different individuals with a little difference. This is what is called as biological variation, man to man. So normal blood glucose level in the fasting is 70 to 110 milligrams per deciliter. You all must remember this forever. And then there is what is called as postprandial blood glucose level. This postprandial is given a definition. Even though after taking food anything is postprandial, but our medical postprandial term is given to a specific time, and that specific time is once you have started taking food, in the middle of the food you start your timer, and then you go on follow the timer up to 2 hours. So after two hours after taking a meal, then you take a sample of blood and estimate the blood glucose. And this particular value is called as postprandial blood glucose. So there are 2 terms, most important terms. Fasting, that is 8 to 12 hours after the last meal. You take a sample of blood and estimate. And that is what is called as a fasting blood glucose. And a postprandial, a meal is taken or occasionally to test in the laboratory a bolus dose of glucose 75 grams also will be given. 75 grams of glucose weighed, anhydrous dextrose is weighed, and then it will be dissolved in a glass of water, which may be around 250 to 300 ml, and dissolve it completely and ask the individual to swallow. And after that, 2 hours, you take a sample of blood and then you estimate that blood per blood glucose. And what will be the level? And this is what is in postprandial blood glucose. So this will be in a healthy persons is 120 to 140 milligrams per deciliter 100 ml blood. So these two figures are very, very important to make a decision whether an individual is healthy or his blood glucose levels are shifted on either side. Maybe on the hyper side, increased side, most harmless. And that is associated with the disease diabetes mellitus. So increased blood glucose levels beyond the normal limits, Here, then it is hyperglycemia. And below the specific levels, it is called as hypoglycemia. Truly speaking, when you are calling it 70 is the lower limit, then somebody may ask, is 69 is hypoglycemia? So no, truly, theoretically it is hypo, but as far as our medical definition, it is not hypoglycemia. Our hypoglycemia is less than 40 milligrams per deciliter. 40 milligrams per deciliter level. When it is touching there, then you call it as hypoglycemia. But it is a spectrum of hypoglycemia from below 69 to up to the level of 40. In between range is certainly a hypoglycemic range, but not called as hypoglycemia. But when it touching the 40 milligrams, it is called hypoglycemia. Similarly, once which is crossing 110, that is 111, is it hyperglycemia? We don't define it as a hyperglycemia theoretically, even though high. But once it is crossing 100 and it is crossing 126 mark is crossed, then it is a certain hyperglycemia associated with the disease diabetes mellitus. So in the fasting state, mind you, remember fasting state, in the fasting state, an individual's blood glucose, if it is crossing 126 milligrams per deciliter and more, then you call it as a diabetes mellitus. But truly speaking, even though 111 is also increased level, so from 111 up to 126, in between the values are called as impaired fasting blood glucose. Impaired fasting blood glucose. So 126 crossing is diabetes. In between this gray zone is called as impaired fasting blood glucose. Likewise, postprandial blood glucose level is 120 to 140. Suppose if it is crossing 140 and from 140 up to 200, what is this 200? You must have heard of what is called as renal threshold. So the renal threshold for glucose, once it is crossed, and clearly if it is crossed, the renal threshold is about 180 as per the normal physiological levels. But given some elements, crystal clear elements like above 1, then crossing 200. So postprandial blood glucose crossing 200 is called as diabetes mellitus. Fasting blood glucose crossing 126 is diabetes mellitus. In between this zone, 110 to 126, impaired fasting glucose. This is postprandial, impaired glucose tolerance. 140 to 200, impaired glucose tolerance. Impaired glucose tolerance. So above and below the levels are considered as abnormal. So hyperglycemia, levels above the normal range. Hypoglycemia, levels below the normal range is a blind way of telling, defining it, but two definitions I have told you just now. The homeostasis of blood glucose, we shall try to discuss a little deeper. When low blood glucose is there, then the blood glucose levels are becoming reduced. Why? From the blood, cells are squeezing, taking the glucose and utilizing it. So when they are utilizing from the blood, naturally the levels of blood slowly coming down. When they are coming down, then the low blood glucose level which is circulating in the pancreas stimulates alpha cells and releases a hormone called as glucagon. So when there is a possibility of blood glucose level going down, glucagon will be released. And what it has to do? It has to increase the blood glucose. How can it increase the blood glucose? It acts on initially liver glycogen, stored carbohydrate of the liver. And so glycogen is made into pieces of glucose. That means it is lysis. So it stimulates the glycogenolysis in the liver. Which one? Glucagon. And also it releases that glycogen broken down residues are converted to glucose and they are released into the blood. It is the first step. In the second step, the same glucagon also stimulates those enzymes which are involved in the neogenesis, gluconeogenesis, newly glucose synthesis. But in the postprandial, in the early phase, after taking the food, say for example 4 hours, 5 hours after taking food, this process starts. What is that process? Glucagon process, glycogenolysis, and releasing the glycogen, breaking down products glucose into the blood, and blood glucose level tries to be maintained again because of the release of glucose from the liver, from the glycogen. So this is how in the initial phase the maintenance of blood glucose. On the other side, after taking a food, the blood glucose level starts increasing. So high blood glucose. When high blood glucose is there, again that particular blood in the pancreas now stimulates the insulin, the beta cells. So low blood glucose stimulates alpha cells, high blood glucose stimulates beta cells and releases the important hormone insulin. What is the function of insulin? Now this insulin tries to bring down the blood glucose level towards the fasting levels, or normal levels, you say. So how these ones are, the peripheral tissues will be encouraged to take more blood. Normally, the blood glucose directly cannot enter into the cells, mainly muscle cell, adipose tissue cells, and myocardium, that is heart cells, and even brain cells. These are all, normally they don't just take it like that, but they have the molecules which will allow the glucose molecule in the blood to enter into the interior of the cells. These are what are called as GLUTs, glucose transporter molecules. These glucose transporter molecules are present in different cells, different types. But whereas muscle, adipose tissue, glucose transporter molecules are dependent on insulin hormone, or otherwise they are controlled by the insulin hormone. Insulin hormone gives instructions to take glucose or not to take glucose. When there is a increased blood glucose, immediately insulin gives instructions to adipose tissue, muscle, and the insulin controlled tissues, all of them, to allow these transporter molecules to allow the glucose into the cells, those cells. So this is how insulin controls by way of flushing glucose from the blood into the cells. Now, this is another picture. Here, the liver, in the fasting state, let us say, in the fasting state, in the liver, the glucagon is active and it produces, it enhances gluconeogenesis and glycogenolysis, breakdown of glycogen, synthesis of glucose from non-carbohydrate sources, both are stimulated, increased. As it is a fasting state, the glucose assimilation or entry from the gastrointestinal tract is nil or minimal. Nothing is not there. And at the same time, glucose entering into the adipose tissues is also blocked. Because insulin levels will be reduced. When the glucagon is high, the insulin levels will be reduced, and now these cells are blocked for entry of glucose. So this is the adipose tissues will not take glucose is one. On the other side, the same glucagon acts on the adipose tissue and enhances lipolysis. So breakdown of the fats and increases the free fatty acids, and they will be used more by the resting muscle for action or sustainedly acting muscle. So this is how the fasting state. Whereas in the postprandial state, high insulin, here high glucagon, here high insulin. What is this insulin now does? In the liver, it blocks, it stops, or it reduces the gluconeogenesis and glycogenolysis. Glycogen breakdown is reduced. New glucogenesis synthesis is also being reduced by the insulin. And absorption of glucose into the blood, as there is the postprandial state, there is a nutrition, the digestion has taken place, and then glucose is entering into the blood. This is active, and here the glucose now is being pushed into the adipose tissues. The insulin opens the gates here on in the adipose cells, and glucose enters into the adipose cell, and here glucose is converted to fatty acids and then fats. So lipogenesis is stimulated, and the lipid conversion into fatty acids and then further going into the muscle is being inhibited. So insulin inhibits the fats breaking down. That means lipolysis. Lipolysis is inhibited by insulin. Lipogenesis is stimulated by insulin. Gluconeogenesis is inhibited by insulin. Glycogen synthesis, that is the storage of glucose in the form of carbohydrate, in the form of fat, is being encouraged by the insulin when there is increased glucose circulating in the blood. That's it. Okay. Now, regulation of blood glucose levels. How do they get regulated? The hyperglycemic effects of glucagon and the hypoglycemic effect of insulin. So what is the glucagon doing in toto? When there is low glucose, glucagon is liberated, glycogen is broken down, new glucose is synthesized, and these are all being stimulated by glucagon and its friends. Many friends are there. We will be talking about them a little bit later. That means other hormones which are in association with are in supporting the glucagon hormone are there. But the most and important one is adrenaline, and cortisol, ACTH, and then thyroid. And these are the important associates They are all, what do? They tries to increase the blood glucose level. They tries to increase the blood glucose level. So hyperglycemic effect. Hyperglycemic effect. Whereas insulin, what does it do? When there is a lot of glucose or more glucose has entered into the bloodstream, it tries to reduce this blood glucose level by sharing it to the various cells. Some are, most of them are the storage cells, glycogen, in the form of glycogen in the liver and muscle and a little bit in the kidney medulla, and whereas in the form of fats in the adipose tissues. So this is being encouraged by the hormone insulin. So this is how, in a dynamic way, you see, when there is high blood glucose, it promotes insulin release. Insulin released and then pushes the glucose into the tissues, and then blood glucose will be reduced. And then when blood glucose is lowered, then lowered blood glucose promotes glucagon release by the pancreas. The glucagon is then liberated and it stimulates glycogen breakdown and etc. So glucose, like from the glycogen to glucose is then liberated, and the glucose is released into the blood and then increases the blood glucose levels. So raises the blood glucose levels. So this is how it maintains. This is the another causes the recruitment of glucose transporters. Insulin causes the recruitment of glucose transporters. How the glucose enters into the cell? By way of a protein molecule, a channel. If that channel is there, glucose freely can enter into. How does this channels will be recruited? They normally also will be there in the cell. They are synthesized by genes, and then they are present in the cellular cytoplasm. When hyperglycemia is there, or otherwise increased glucose in the blood is there, insulin comes and gives a signal and recruits all these glucose transporters in the skeletal muscle, in the cardiac muscle, and in the adipose tissues. These are the main sites where insulin acts and does this function. When transporters are recruited into the cells, then that particular glucose molecules freely enters in through these channels. When there is hypoglycemia, rather the glucose levels are reduced, then insulin will not be there, and then there won't be any signal, and these channels, transporter molecules, will again go back into the cellular vicinity. So they go back and then they will be there in the cytoplasm circulating. So this is how they recruit, the insulin recruits the glucose transporter molecules and tries to see that glucose in the blood enters into the cell. So overview of regulation of blood glucose. What is this? Hyperglycemic factors. What are the hyper sources of blood glucose? So what are all the sources now? Absorption from GIT, starch, that is the food. All our food is the rice, wheat, etc. Grains, they are all rich in starch. Starch is broken down by amylase and glucose enters into the blood. Glycogenolysis in the liver. Later on, it is the glycogenolysis. That's how also the blood glucose enters. The gluconeogenesis in the liver, amino acid to glucose. These are all contributing to blood glucose levels. And which are the ones which are utilizing the blood glucose, hypoglycemic factors? Glycolysis, that is utilization of glucose, oxidation of glucose for the sake of energy, which is ultimately channeled into the trichloroacetic acid, TCA cycle, trichloroacetic acid cycle. And then glycogen synthesis in the liver, that is storage form, and lipogenesis, lipid form stored. So these are all the hypoglycemic events. These are hyperglycemic events. And hyperglycemia producing hormones, glucagon, adrenaline, corticosteroids, that is cortisol, etc. Growth hormone, ACTH, and thyroxine. Growth hormone is another one. So these are all a group of hormones are trying to increase the blood glucose, but there is only one hormone, that is insulin, that is trying to reduce the blood glucose. This is not unfair, because in this tug of war, on one side there are about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 major players, and there are many minor players also there. On one side they are pulling the rope, and the other side only one person, muscle man, that is the insulin, is pulling the rope on the other side. The reason is nature is very, very wise. The wise is, the wisdom is that hyperglycemia, if it is there, it can only produce a small disease or some disturbance in the normal health. Normal health. A person can survive over years, then only he will get a complication of diabetes, and maybe he will die. And that is the ill effect, ill problem, bad problem of hyperglycemia. But if hypoglycemia occurs, you know what will happen. If a blood glucose level comes to 40 and it is sustained for more than 5 minutes, there is going to be permanent brain damage. Permanent brain damage. Mind you, my dear students, never allow hypoglycemia to sustain for longer time. Immediate action need to be taken. Within 10 minutes, if the action is not taken, then the man is going to have permanent damage to nervous system or even certain organs. Whereas hyperglycemia, only in the extreme conditions, may produce a coma, but normally that coma can be revised if immediate action is taken. But the sustained hyperglycemia, you can take a lot of time to treat it. But hypoglycemia, instantaneously you should treat. Otherwise, there is going to be death or damage. Factors maintaining blood glucose. Glycogenolysis, liver glycogen. During early fasting. That is 12 hours to 18 hours in between. It is a glycogenolysis. That is the main one that replenishes the glucose in the blood. So maintains the blood glucose. In the diet and after the diet, what will happen? After the digestion and absorption, a lot of material, blood glucose is coming. Then in the initial phase, it is the use is by oxidation. But when the diet glucose has started, then it has to be stored. In which form? Glycogenesis form and also lipogenesis form into the adipose tissues. And a prolonged fasting is called as a starvation. That is more than 18 hours is called as starvation. In this condition, still the blood glucose level is maintained. It is maintained by way of neogenesis, new glucose synthesis. The main substrate being the amino acids. That means the muscle flesh, muscle protein is being broken down. Amino acids are being given. We learned in the previous class most of the amino acids except leucine and lysine. Leucine and lysine are except that remaining all will contribute to new glucose synthesis. So the muscle protein is the main one which gives us glucose in starvation state. Starvation state. So that's why in the starvation the muscle mass is reduced. And there is one important test called as a oral glucose tolerance test. Now, when there is a hyperglycemia, sustained hyperglycemia, then we call it a disease, diabetes mellitus. Diabetes mellitus. As the blood glucose is highly dynamic, when you take a little bit of food, it raises. When you stop the taking food, the other side mechanisms like the glycogenolysis, gluconeogenesis operates, and the hormones are also having a concentrated action. And this balance, once is shifted towards one side, that is hyperglycemic side, is most common. And this shift is called, is there, then there is an increased circulating blood glucose is called as that particular associated disease is called as diabetes mellitus. As the glucose level is increased beyond the threshold level, that is renal threshold level, that is 200. When it is crossing it, then the glucose is seeping into the urine. So when you take the urine and you test it, if glucose is there, reducing sugar, glucose is there, then you call it as the person might be suffering from, might be 99% suffering from diabetes mellitus. But the final diagnosis is by way of estimating blood glucose, not the testing urine glucose. Because testing urine glucose have one or two class, and that class are errors. We'll see it in the latter. So now, the blood glucose levels increase, hyperglycemia. The disease associated with hyperglycemia, mainly diabetes mellitus. It is due to insufficient insulin secretion or insufficient action. Insufficient action. Its action might be blunt. So, because of these two reasons, there is going to be increased blood glucose, which is called as diabetes mellitus. And whether a person is having diabetes mellitus, as the blood glucose test varies very extremes, depending upon the individual's behavior and the food habits and its behavior of smoking, it is his behavior of exercising, etc. And hence, to diagnose the diabetes mellitus, one standard test is being given by our medical literature, and that is oral glucose tolerance test. Oral by mouth glucose tolerance test. Glucose tolerance challenge test. Glucose challenge test. What is this? Yes. That means here, what you do is a person in a fasting state. Fasting is about 10 to 14 hours postprandially. 10 to 14 hours postprandially is called a fasting. So after last meal, you ask the person not to take anything up to 10 hours. And then later on, once he comes to our laboratory, it's a laboratory test. It is a test done in the laboratory. He has to keep the individual in your laboratory and give him, take a sample of blood. How much is the blood glucose to be estimated in that fasting sample? And then same time simultaneously ask him to give a sample of urine and check whether urine is containing glucose or not. So two things should be done: blood glucose estimation, urine glucose testing. Blood glucose estimation, urine glucose testing. What is the zero time? Zero time is a fasting time. Fasting time. What is meant by fasting? After last meal, that is in the overnight at around 8 to 10 o'clock food is taken, and then after that you calculate 10 hours, and after 10 hours you ask him to sit in your lab. That is 10 hours after. But over enthusiastic person may take a long time. He may at times tell you, sir, you asked me to fast. I have been fasting for 24 hours. So this is not, my students, this is not fasting. This is not called fasting. It is called starving. Anytime crossing beyond 18 hours is called as starving time. Now the mechanism is different. Neogenesis factors takes upper hand. So that should not be taken for this testing. So 10 to 14 hours in between, and that is from the last meal, last night meal. And in that time, a sample of blood is taken, a sample of urine is taken. This is the fasting sample. And later on, you will give him a 75 grams of glucose, 75 grams of anhydrous glucose dissolved in 250 to 300 ml of glass of water, and then ask him to swallow fast. He may say, I will take small sip for half an hour. It's not allowed. He should swallow it within a maximum period of 3 to 5 minutes, a maximum of 5 minutes. So start the timer. And at half an hour time, you take a sample of blood, a sample of urine. At 1 hour time, you take a sample of blood, a sample of urine. So half an hour, 1 hour, 1.5 hours, 2 hours, 2.5 hours and 3 hours. This is the classical GTT. Classical GTT. So many times taking the blood, taking the urine is a little inconvenience. But even though this is a standard classical glucose tolerance test, our clinical setting, it is quite difficult to have so many. So a simple alteration we're using commonly in the lab, and that is in the fasting 1 hour and 2 hours. And in case of indication, only 3 hours. So normally 3 samples at the request of the clinician when he doesn't get or he cannot interpret the curve, then he may ask for a third one. But classically, it is the 7 samples that is what glucose tolerance test. What is going to happen? Let us say this is a fasting sample, a half an hour, 1 hour, 1.5 hour, 2 hours, the half an hour, 1 hour, 1.5 hour, 2 hour, 2.5, and the later extended is 2 and 3 hours. Normally 2.5 hours, half an hour samples, up to 2.5 hours is sufficient. And then the blood glucose levels are estimated and a graph is being taken in a normal graph. Here you see in the y-axis, the blood glucose level is depicted. Here this is the time. In the fasting sample, say he got around 80. And in the first hour, he got around 138 or something, less than 140. And here it is almost come down to even less than the fasting, a little less than the fasting. So here if it is 80, this may be 70. This is an exact, excellent normal GTP. This is blood glucose, mind you. But when another example you see, in the fasting state, 0 time, it is around 110. And in the 1 hour period, it has almost nearer to 170, and this is 150, and this is around 110. So this is anyway fasting, and then after 2.5 hours also elevated almost nearer to the upper threshold. But here this is almost crossed the upper limit 140 in the postprandial state, and then almost touching 178 or 175, something level that. So this is what is called as impaired glucose tolerance. Here we have a line. This line is renal threshold. Renal threshold for glucose is 180 milligrams per deciliter. 180 milligrams per deciliter. Don't forget. Books may vary, maybe 176 or 170 or 180. So 170 to 180 is the definite answer for the renal threshold. Once it is crossing, and if it crossing 200, and it's gone. So now it is gone beyond the renal threshold, and hence it is diabetes mellitus. So this is the definite diagnosis of diabetes mellitus by oral glucose tolerance test. GTT, what is the definition of GTT? GTT is a well-standardized test and is highly useful to diagnose diabetes mellitus in doubtful cases only. Definite cases I have told you in the starting itself. Once in the fasting state, it is crossing 126 milligrams per deciliter in 2 times. You do it 2 times, even today and after 1 more week afterwards, another time. If 2 times, definitely 126 is crossed. You brand him diabetes mellitus. You no need of glucose tolerance test. But one time it is crossing, another time it is low, that is 100. Then you go for glucose tolerance test for diagnosis in such condition. And the second also in the postprandial, that is after giving 75 grams of glucose, you take it as a sample at 2 hours after that. And there, if it is crossing 200 milligrams, and do it second time, and 2 times if it is crossing 200, then also you brand it as diabetes mellitus. Don't go for GTT. But again here, disparity. One time like diabetes, another time like normal, then go for oral glucose tolerance test. Commonly referred to as oral glucose tolerance test. How to prepare the patient? I have already told you, I read it. The patient is instructed to have a good carbohydrate diet for 3 days before to the test. Because I am going to the test, let him not starve for 3 days and come for the test of the diabetes. This is not a correct test. The condition of the individual will not be reflected. The diet containing about at least minimum 30 to 50 grams of carbohydrate. Nowadays, you must be listening to certain people who are taking fatty diets, keto diet they are talking. And they are taking oils in the morning. This is a variant diet. We shall not discuss the merits or demerits, but such a diet taking and coming to oral glucose tolerance test for the diagnosis of diabetes mellitus is a blunder. So he should normally taking his normal protein food. He should take protein food. Then only we should do this particular test on the following day. Otherwise, carbohydrate may not be tolerated even in a normal person. If somebody is going in the ketone diets for some time and then he goes for the oral glucose tolerance test, the test will be abnormal. The patient should avoid drugs like influence in the blood glucose levels. Certain drugs like cortisol influences blood glucose, and such drugs should not be taking. And if such drugs he is taking, then he want to go for oral glucose tolerance test, he should stop the test for some time if the clinical condition permits. Otherwise, no, the test should not be done. Patient should not do smoking. Yeah, smoking influences the oral glucose tolerance test. So smoking is banned when he is going for test. High effort of exercise on the previous day is to be avoided. A great exercise for 3 hours. He should not go to the gym and do exercise for 3 hours and the next day coming for the oral glucose test, tolerance test, not accepted. Patient should not take food after 8 p.m. in the previous night. After 8 p.m. in the previous night, he should not take food. He should not go for pub. He should not go for some marriage purpose and take night meal at around 11 o'clock and come for the next following day, taking ice creams and etc. Is all going to be a waste for exercise for oral glucose tolerance test. Should not take any breakfast. On the same day, taking coffee, taking breakfast, taking some food, and coming to the test is not accepted. So, oral glucose tolerance test. What is the purpose? To diagnose diabetes mellitus. Diagnose diabetes mellitus. So, and what are the precautions? Just now we have been discussing. There is no indication for doing oral glucose test in a person with a confirmed diabetes mellitus. I have been telling you that confirmed diabetes, once he has been already previously confirmed, and now he has come, and I want to check whether I am having diabetes or not. For that purpose, oral glucose tolerance test is not needed. And GTT has no role in the following up of the diabetes, not role. There is no use in the following up of diabetes. Whether my diabetes is coming down or not coming down, GTT doing is no use. It is indicated only for the initial diagnosis, first diagnosis purposes. When the diagnosis is controversial, then only the oral glucose tolerance test will confirm whether diabetes is or not. The test should not be done in ill patients, already very severe patient who cannot tolerate even normal not having food and then normal fasting. And in such patients, you should not challenge him. You should not do the test. Procedure for standard oral glucose tolerance test is depicted here, and it is at about 8 a.m. Last 8 a.m. 8 p.m. he has taken last meal, and he has followed all the precautions. He has come to your laboratory or your clinic at about 8 a.m. The fasting blood glucose and urine samples are to be collected. And these are called zero samples or initial samples. Then what you will do? A loading dose of 75 grams of anhydrous glucose. You have to weigh it in a weighing scale and dissolved in 250 to 300 ml of water is given to the patient. This is dextrose solution. This is for the sake of IV glucose tolerance test. There is another specialized test that is not will not come in this discussion. In children, suppose children you want to do oral glucose tolerance test, then it is not 75 glucose, 75 grams of glucose should not be given. You take the body weight, and for every 1 kg of body weight, you weigh 1.75 grams of glucose and dissolve it and give it to the immunity. In the classical procedure, the blood and urine samples are collected at the half-hourly intervals that I have told you, and the next 2.5 hours to 3 hours. Glucose is estimated in all the blood samples. Urine is analyzed for the presence of glucose. And blood biochemistry, you see, in one person, fasting blood plasma in a normal glucose tolerance test less than 110. In the impaired glucose tolerance, it is 110 to 125. And crossing 126, diabetes mellitus. And after 2 hours, it is less than 140. This is the normal. Whereas impaired glucose, 140 to 199, this is called as a impaired glucose tolerance person. You don't call him diabetes, impaired glucose, not a normal person. So there is a spectrum of individual in between. The diabetes mellitus crossing 200. If crossing 126 is fasting, crossing 200 in the postprandial, you brand him diabetes mellitus, or otherwise anywhere it is crossing 200 in the oral glucose tolerance test, you brand him diabetes. So this is a normal curve. 75 milligrams of in the fasting state, throughout no glucose in the urines, and no in the almost throughout a maximum of 140. It crossed, not crossed 150 anywhere. So this is absolutely normal. Now here another one. Here this is the threshold level. Threshold level of 180. The levels have crossed, and 126 fasting is already crossed, and here they have crossed 2 hourly blood glucose has crossed 200. So both the definitions also is allowing. Not only that, at any point it is crossing the renal threshold, we are going to say it is a diabetes mellitus. And consistent findings are the urine is also containing glucose in it. So now this is a classical diabetes mellitus, uncontrolled. The next one, a diabetic curve. Now you see, this appears totally normal. My students see it. Nowhere it is crossing 140, and almost the fasting is only 90. But come here, what has happened? Glucose is present in the urine. Urine should not have glucose at this level. Only when it crosses the renal threshold, then only it should. So this is people who has tested their urines and saw glucose is there in the urine. They will come to a conclusion, I am suffering from diabetes mellitus. No. But still, it is not normal. Then what it is? This is called as renal glycosuria, a benign condition. That is least injurious condition. That's not injurious. This is what the homeostasis of blood and the implications of increased blood glucose. This is called diabetes mellitus. And to identify the diabetes mellitus, diagnose the diabetes mellitus by way of oral glucose tolerance test. And then the last one, an abnormal curve, is called as the renal glycosuria, where the blood glucose is normoglycemia, no hyperglycemia, but there is glycosuria. Normoglycemia with glycosuria is renal glycosuria. Hyperglycemia with glycosuria is diabetes mellitus. Remember these two important statements. And diabetes mellitus, a very commonest disease of the world population. and hence you should not make any mistake in the diagnosis of actus mellitus, nor let me you should learn the treatment part of it. Thank you very much. Read well.